Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Spirit of the Valley. I have a treat today that is a very different kind of a guest that I find fascinating, and I would like you to meet Dr. Dan Villiers, a psychologist who has founded and is the director of admissions of the Mountain Valley Treatment Center in Haverhill. And this is, some of you know the Beckett schools and the schools in Pike, Haverhill, Campton, Plymouth, all treating different kinds of children, young adolescents mainly. And this is the newest baby of the Beckett family, and it involves anxiety-ridden, I don't know if that sounds dramatic, but children with anxiety issues, just severe enough that they are kept from living a good, normal, happy life.
That's right.
So Dan, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
And Thank you for having me.
I'd love you to describe a little bit about what this particular new addition to the Beckett services is meant to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are a small 30 to 90-day stay program. It's a residential treatment program, which means obviously the students stay there on site, on campus. And students come from all over, really mostly the East Coast, but we've had students come from over the country.
Yeah.
And their primary challenge is with anxiety disorders. And there are a number of anxiety disorders, ranging from some of which, some people might be familiar with, but there's sort of panic disorder, social anxiety, OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. Kids come to us with maybe a history of trauma. But whatever the anxiety disorder, they are plagued by fear and anxiety and the symptoms associated with those fears.
Right.
And they're quite debilitating. So we treat those symptoms in an intensive daily way, where a private practice or maybe even an outpatient program couldn't really do, because of their severity and their level of intrusiveness in their lives.
Exactly right. Now, is there a curriculum you're also working with while they're with you, so that they're getting
academic curriculum?
Academic.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a private tutoring company that we work with called Narrow Tutoring, and the majority of students get one-on-one tutoring while they're there. And that's important because a lot of these kids' anxieties, it stems from, they're often quite high-functioning. They have this perfectionistic tendency where they're very self-critical, self-evaluative, and that sort of instigates a lot of their anxiety and fears. So we try to overcome a lot of that anxiety through the tutoring process, while also helping them, stay up to date with their schoolwork.
And the ratio of student to adult is so great, that it's so great in a good way, that I would think would speed that up a little bit, just because there's a relationship right off the bat that children in a classroom of 20 don't have, or at least certainly not right away.
Yeah.
So that has to help with someone they get to trust, and trust is a big deal with anxiety, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the toughest part is these kids have often dropped out of school. One of the biggest epidemic issues in the United States today is anxiety, school avoidance, school phobia. There are millions of kids that are too terrified to go to school today. Sometimes the origins are due to bullying or teasing. Other times they could be due to just a real lack of confidence academically or socially, or social fears that have developed over time.
Social is big.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of, it's such a huge part of all our lives, and adolescents are so sensitive about that social interaction, that process.
I have never heard more about bullying than I have in the last few years.
Yeah.
Something about the way our kids are growing up, that they feel it's okay. It's just it's rampant, and I wouldn't want to go to school either if I was being treated like some of the stories I've heard.
Yeah.
And when you get a child, I mean, your whole goal essentially is to get their hands off that door that they won't go out, and feeling comfortable to go back into that normal life, which they don't think is normal.
Yeah, we find them, I get to the students at a certain point where they are skipping school a lot, or have dropped out of school completely. They're living a life at home, usually playing video games 5 to 6 hours a day, sort of basically living either in their bedroom or in their basement. And they've kind of created this cocoon of safety where the outside world, which they perceive as a threat in many ways, they're able to avoid that. And video games, often online video games, it provides a lot for them. It provides them an ability to cope with the boredom of staying at home.
Exactly.
And coping with their fears. But it makes them feel a little more powerful. They kind of play this heroic
Well,
figure
they're
on the video.
engaged.
They're engaged.
Yeah.
But they also play this very heroic figure
Oh.
on this video game.
Someone they know they're
So
not.
the powerless nature that they are continually in is sort of put at rest for a bit while they play this heroic figure on the video game. And so that's their way of self-medicating that condition.
And their parents have just thrown up their hands at this point and said, I'm not going to make a big deal of this, it's just too awful.
Yeah, often at that point they're like, all parents, they want their kids to, be happy,
Right.
to feel safe, and not to experience extreme anxiety and
Right.
fear. And they've noticed that, my kid's happy when he's playing video games. Maybe this is okay right now. We'll do something in a couple of months, but in the
Right.
meantime, we're
Just
going to let him
let
do
him
what he needs to do.
Get out of the
to,
unhappy place
That's right.
he's been in.
That's right.
Does the school ever do anything about it in terms of intervening when they
Yeah, depending on the...
truancy and everything?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, small private schools will definitely encourage students to, there'll be some support from therapists to,
Right.
they might come to the home and try and get them to school, but it's a very different model. They've got to work with so many other students,
Yeah.
especially in public
Exactly.
schools. So it's very little they can do. There are resource rooms, there are special education components of schools to provide support, but if the student can't get there, there's not much you can do.
And it's a vicious cycle because those are the students who get picked on
That's right.
and bullied. I was in special ed for several years,
Oh, you
and
are? Okay.
I'm very aware of how defensive I would become when my student would be at the receiving end of some of that, and I could see it in other kids too. And that would, anxiety comes from all places, but I think school at that age is the biggest. That's their whole life. They're there more days, more hours than they are any other place.
Yeah, it
and
is
if you
that
have a 7-hour day or something, that's 7 hours of pure torture.
That's right.
And so your center, when did it start?
I designed Mountain Valley about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
With collaboration with Jay Walter,
Right.
who is the president of the Beckett Family of
Right.
Services. And we work closely together on this project to try and really provide a new service. I mean, anxiety, as I've said, is epidemic in this country today. There are close to 5 million kids in this country who are experiencing extreme anxiety. And so much so that I really feel we're living in a culture of fear.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot going on in our society in the last 5 years. There's been an economic collapse.
Right.
There are wars around
Wars.
the country. And, kids are seeing this stuff on TV now. Kids saw some pretty terrible things on 9/11
Horrible.
on the news.
Horrible.
And they are realizing that, life is a little fragile. And all a kid wants is to feel stable. They want to feel that everything's going to be okay.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, a lot of them aren't. And that's what we really want to help them with.
And it's easy to say everything's going to be all right, but there's so much more to that because that's where your psychology degree comes in. Because parents say it every day. Oh, it's nothing to worry about. It's so easy for us to say,
Yeah.
today will be a better day.
So what happens is, I'll say to a kid when I meet them, I really believe everything's going to be okay if you do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
If you stay in this home setting, living a life of fear and avoidance, self-medicating with video games, you're going to be here in 10 years. That's the statistics.
Right.
But you have a really great chance of facing this crossroads in a very important way.
Right.
And there's one road that is assertively confronting your fears and anxieties. And we provide a setting where they can do that in a safe, empathetic, supportive way. When I was in private practice, I'd have this sort of golden 50-minute hour to work with a child.
Yeah.
And I'd provide these wonderful strategies and skills that they could go home with and practice. But you try inspiring a kid to do that at home on their own, to do exercises, to get them to face their fears, to call their friends and go and meet up with them.
Oh, at those ages, too.
Yeah. So what we do, they come to us for several months, between 30 and 90 days, and we push them to engage in that social interaction.
Good.
To face their fears.
Good.
A lot of fears are learned over time, and for that reason they can be unlearned. It's just that you need the courage, the inspiration, and the guidance of know how to do that.
And parents, we all think we know everything. We don't know anything, and certainly not in the world of issues like that
Yeah.
need psychological help.
Yeah.
But I remember various reasons over the years of not wanting to go to school, and maybe now I think it might have been anxiety, but it was something that one day you just didn't feel right. It must
Yeah.
have been something that happened the day before. You told me something, I don't think I've ever been aware of this. You go and meet them at their homes.
Well, it started when I was in private practice in West Hartford, Connecticut. I was very passionate about opening up a social anxiety group. Social anxiety was a very prevalent condition. It is a very prevalent condition in the United States.
Yeah.
And so I'd set up this amazing group, but the kids would never come because of their fear of, meeting other people, let alone other people with the same fears.
And having to talk about something so personal.
Yeah, talk about something that is so fear-based in the first place.
Exactly.
But really what I require for them to do is to come to me. And I thought the best way to have a great admissions process and make a great program is to build the relationship with the student very early on. Not only so I can find the right kid for the program so we can really assure as best we can that we can help them, but connect with them at their lowest point. So what I do when I get a call from a family, and usually they're referred from a pediatrician or a psychiatrist, an educational consultant.
Sure.
And I do a sort of pre-screening evaluation, and then I'll set up a meeting in the home. And often the student is maybe in the basement in their room. They've got their door locked, and they've said to their family, "I will never talk to anyone about this. I can't believe you brought this guy over.
Yeah, they're
Who is
mad.
this guy?" And I'm sort of used to that, but what I do is that I go in, I speak to the family about the program, and then I'll go often and talk to the student through the door, just to start the
That's
dialogue.
amazing.
You've got to start so incrementally when
Yeah.
you're treating fear.
Exactly.
You start from, the sort of the smallest fear, and then gradually go up to sort of confronting them and challenging them in a more challenging way later on. Sort of what we call a hierarchy of fears. You start low and then go to more intense.
So ultimately, you reach the height that they are at.
That's correct.
In other words,
Yep.
you can get to things that they might say, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
not beyond that."
And if you push them too hard, you can push them away.
You can push them away, and you also have to win over the family, because this is not
Yeah.
something the kiddo is going to be taking care of himself financially,
Exactly.
and it's a bond you need with them, because if you're not credible, and you are credible, and you told me some things about you that were credible, but
Sure.
that's up to you where we go with that. But I think it's like, I don't know, meeting them on their turf seems to me that the most effective way than dragging, and I mean probably dragging them to wherever you would be, or to the school,
Yeah.
or that's where you
Historically, a
resist.
lot of residential programs will have the students come to the program, and I felt that there's something. Really, what we're trying to do is build some strength in the parents to allow their children to go off to residential, because they're fearful too.
You bet.
They're very protective, and they don't want their kids necessarily to experience this anxiety and to be in a new place. And at times, sometimes they've enabled, their anxiety.
That word was going to come
Yeah.
up with me eventually.
Yeah.
Do they ever fear that they're making it too easy, that he has to
Yeah.
kind of go through the hurt? to
Oh,
get
I've
to
heard
where-
parents say, if you panic at school or you feel uncomfortable, leave, you can leave, Of course, that is perpetuating this cycle of reinforcement of escape.
That's exactly the right
But
word.
I don't blame parents they don't know that.
I know.
It's not a critical statement. It's an opportunity to educate and inform.
Yeah.
But forming that alliance with the parents and say, we are creating a new team here, and I'm a part of it. And I'm going to bring in your child too, because there's often some family conflict too.
Absolutely.
So there's multiple things that I have to do. I have to create a connection between the family and the kid that has become somewhat sort of disenfranchised and
Yep.
become a little hopeless.
Yep.
I have to try and inspire the kid to buy into leaving home. Sometimes they've been home at 6 months hiding. So so if I can bring the kid on board, empower the parents to give something new a try.
Yeah.
We've seen some remarkable results with these kids.
And the parents must feel just incredible about this. I mean, I remember some of the Oliverian parents when
Yeah.
I went to a graduation once.
Yep.
And these kids were so transformed that they would literally stand on the stage as a class speaker and say, I never thought I'd be out here doing this, because
Yeah.
5 years ago I was doing X, Y, and Z, and now look at me.
Yeah.
And they just share. They opened up and they face them, and not only face them, but talk about it. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that would happen ultimately with these kids when they're older, just realizing
Oh, yeah.
what had them stuck and how hard it was for them to unstick themselves, or even with the parents.
We had, I must tell you the story, we had this wonderful student, and I can't tell you all the details for
No.
confidentiality reasons, but he was very phobic of talking to other people, so he had some social anxiety.
Yep.
Some school avoidance and phobias, so he really terrified going back to school.
Sure.
He was teased and bullied. And he came to our program for 3 months, and really every week we saw this sort of confident side come out. And there's something so powerful about being around kids with the same problem. You know, they understand. And when you're in a place of safety and understanding, that's when you can disclose about these things without the fear of evaluation and judgment.
It's a little bit like an AA meeting might look like, I would suspect,
Sure.
just because you lose that fear when you hear this person next to you dare to
Yeah.
open up about it, and then you say, "You too," and that's a real empowering,
Yep.
liberating situation for kids or adults.
Yeah. Oh, these kids think they're the only ones experiencing
Yeah,
this.
and that's why your approach makes so much sense. First meeting them in their setting,
Yep.
not in a strange place.
Yep.
And some of these probably have never been away overnight, or
Some have gone to a summer camp, but the real test is going from that initial meeting in the home to taking them to the center, which can take a long time.
Yeah.
It can take sometimes a week, but sometimes a couple of months, where I'm calling the student on the phone, calling the family. We'll have Skype sessions. All of this is a part of the gradual exposure process to what they fear, which is leaving home.
Right.
They have a lot of separation anxiety.
Yep.
And by building that relationship, by desensitizing themselves to something, to the unknown, it really helps and facilitates that movement to treatment.
I've seen adults in the same boat, and they were probably kids that, had you been around, would have tackled it sooner.
Right.
And they're now getting help for that. But I think people forget that anxiety is an enormous prevalent thing in any age.
It is actually the most common mental health challenge in children today,
I believe
in
it.
adolescents today.
I believe it.
More than ADHD, more than depression, it is the most commonly diagnosed. And when I was 16, and this is why I do what I do. When I was 16, I had very bad anxiety to the point that I couldn't go to school. I couldn't get on my school bus. And I stayed at home for about 6 months, and there was no residential program to help me out, just like there isn't today. There's a few programs in psychiatric hospital settings that are good alternative options, but we don't have that hospital feel. I call it, in many ways, a summer camp for anxiety.
Such a good way to put it.
Yeah, where we really kind of complement intensive individual therapy and group therapy and family therapy with the beautiful outdoors that our 1,800-acre campus can offer. But I was one of those kids at 16. I dropped out, and my parents didn't understand. I grew up in London, and in a time and place where, you know, if you experienced anxiety, you were just told to relax. If you were sad, you were told to cheer up.
That's right.
And
Stiff upper lip over
yeah,
there.
exactly. And I used to tell my dad, you know, if I could, I would.
And that's where it's so hard, the communications of kids at, well, almost all ages, but clearly at the adolescent ages. They don't communicate well. They don't share. They're not demonstrative most of the time as far as issues. They don't know who to talk to. They don't want to be labeled and,
That's true.
you know, singled out.
Yeah.
So they'd rather just keep it in and make it worse.
Yeah, and that's what I almost start with in the interview process. I start the therapy there almost, you know, really to tell them, you know, through that, what we call the normalization process of
Yes.
them knowing that there are millions of other kids just like them, paralyzed by fear.
And then to hear that you were one.
I was one of them.
Has to help.
And that I overcame it. And this is how to do it. And I'm going to be here with you throughout this process.
I think that's the other thing, continuity. It isn't just a different teacher every year, and most of them will say, cheer up, and very few will take the time to really stop and sit down and figure out. And that's just a function of size and space and time for most schools.
Yeah.
But I know, I've told you I had some anxiety at one point, but fabulous about it. I mean, it just really can be taken care of rather simply, if you're willing to go in, really just face it and do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think our viewers could possibly imagine how many people out there you could use. You're in one building now, which you've just filled.
Yeah.
You could use tenfold
Oh, absolutely.
the amount of beds you have right now.
You know, the numbers sort of change. There's around 5 million kids in the United States that have severe anxiety disorders. Really what determines someone who has a severe anxiety to actually needing residential treatment means, you know, to what extent does it interfere with their social life, their school life, their family life. They come to us somewhat as almost a last resort. You know, there's family conflict, there's school avoidance, and there's social fear, or a lack of social connection, and chronic low self-esteem. So much so that their only sort of, as I said, safe place is on their own.
And if it wasn't a family dysfunction before that, I'm guessing that it produces a tremendous dysfunction because the parents are livid that you're not going to school.
Oh, the toughest thing I hear on the road, Judy, I've got to tell you, is when a parent will tell me, I feel so guilty, what have I done to my child? And it's really, and I tell them, you know, there is a biological component to anxiety. There are kids that are born a little hypersensitive or more emotional.
Yes.
Yes, things, you know, anxiety is a learned condition over time in many ways. But parents do the best they can.
They aren't equipped for this. I mean, we don't come with a manual, as they say.
so
And but I can just imagine the fights over the schools. I mean, I'm sure our household had them all the time. I mean, I just don't want to go today. I just don't want to go. I don't know why. I just don't want to go. And the fights to try to get your kid out the door, because that's where you're supposed to put your job is, to get them into school.
Right.
And then they come home and there's that battle going on.
And do you know what the community and the neighborhood will blame? They'll blame the parent if they can't get the kid to school.
Everything's the parent thinks everything their child does that's negative is a reflection on them.
So a lot of my meetings in the home is really helping the parents through those difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And they are concerned. They feel a sense of inadequacy of, you know, why can my neighbor get his kid to school and I can't? And I say, you know, unfortunately your son and daughter is struggling with a condition. It will get better. This is not your fault. You've done the best you can.
Exactly.
But from this day forward, let's work together and make this a better experience for your son.
I so relate to that, the guilt of a parent, because we take it on ourselves on everything. And we said, parents will say, I didn't teach him to be like that. I didn't bring my child up to be a troublemaker or a bully.
Sure.
But they learn it, and they see it, and they copy it, and I've seen shows on it recently. I wouldn't want to go to those schools either if I was the kid that was on the show. I mean, it's just an awful thing, and they feel frustration that the school isn't helping enough, and they're limited too.
They are. One differentiation I'd really like to make is that there are two types of kids that avoid school. There's the sort of conduct disorder, behavioral kids that act out a lot. They may be starting to use drugs. They may be getting in fights in schools, and they may drop out and become very school refusal, kind of resistant kids. And we really cater to kids who avoid school based on fear. It doesn't mean they might not have had conflict in the home, but it's fear-based versus truly anger-based or rebellious-based. And now it doesn't mean that those kids don't need care and attention.
No, but they're not trying to do it because they're bad kids or that they're rebellious kids. They truly are frightened.
Yeah, our kids that are avoiding school because of fear. You know, if any of you guys out there came to see Mountain Valley, you'd absolutely see that there is something very similar among all our kids. They are plagued with doubt, apprehension, avoidance, fear, and that's dictating who they become and the decisions they make in life. And we have a team to help them realize that they can live a better life, but they have to start realizing that they have to confront their issues, confront their emotions, however painful they are, and that now is the best time in their life to overcome fear.
But doing it in your setting, to me, is just so ideal sounding, because you've got the one-on-one, you know, you've got the care and attention that you so desperately deserve, and you
Yeah.
don't get that very many places. Even at home, one-on-one doesn't
Yeah.
work because the parents aren't trained.
Yeah, and they're so busy too.
They're busy.
They're both working, but so we'll have individual therapy in the morning for an hour,
Yep.
followed by group therapy, and then family therapy once a week. And then in the evening and afternoon, all of the skills and strategies that we teach are reinforced throughout the entire day.
Fabulous.
Now, I would never ask a parent to do that. I mean, it's just too much.
They
of that.
can't do it.
They can't.
There isn't one at home all day anymore.
So
And-
we basically teach healthy, adaptive behaviors and make them become habitual.
You know, you guys, I hope someone out there is maybe resonating. This is resonating with you because Dan is here to, well, let's say boast a little bit, because you have a success story going on here. You filled up that building very quickly.
We did.
And the biggest problem now is to, I could address this to a certain man, but I won't, is to find you more space.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like, as you said, on waiting lists, some people will drop off them if they're not
That's
taken
right.
right
We
away.
needed. I get on average 5 inquiries a day. We went from 5 a week, and now I get 5 a day. And the need is out there, and the supply is very short. So,
Huge, huge need.
Yeah.
I want to say also, we will put on the screen his contact information.
Okay.
It's the Mountain Valley Treatment Center in Haverhill, but what you're going to need is what we'll put up, which is his email and
Okay.
phone and every other which way we
Yeah.
can do it, because he really, this is a good thing happening up in Haverhill
Yeah.
that people don't know enough about.
And I do this. This is my passion. I mean, it's great that our location is full, but what I'm really passionate about is education, public awareness. I have families calling me all the time and said, I don't think we can get your kid to your program for whatever reason. Maybe it's due to lack of space, but I will spend a lot of time with all those families, helping them through, educating them about anxiety, giving them other options. This is not about just Mountain Valley success.
Right.
This is about addressing an epidemic issue
Right.
that I have devoted my life for, and encouraging other people to become passionate about it.
And that passion comes across rather clearly. I'm sure you out there notice that he means what he says. This is his entire life right now is helping those numbers go down.
Absolutely.
And maybe through other programs growing and learning from you and others how to preempt this, or how to
Yeah.
at least address it when it happens. But it is a huge, huge epidemic almost, I think
Yeah.
is fair to say.
And if parents call and say, I don't know if my kid is at a point where they need residential, you don't need to know anything. Just, if I get a call, I'll say, I'll learn about the level of their anxiety and the corresponding needs that they might, require at that time.
Right.
Whether it's individual therapy, whether it's more intensive outpatient, or whether it is residential.
Yeah.
I want to be a resource and not just a director of admissions.
Not just someone who's out there looking for some check in your hand. I
Yeah.
mean, you really care that
Yeah.
they get what they need,
Yeah.
however that may be.
And we're able to offer incredible scholarships due to the generosity of sometimes other families, the Board of Trustees. We're a nonprofit organization that is doing this to address this.
But you get
need.
endowments at schools like that, as Oliverian does, when
Yeah.
they have a child who came from nowhere to everywhere.
Sure.
They give back.
Yeah.
And I hope you all are taking all of this in, because someone out there has a child, right now, I dare say, that could be helped tremendously by this. They're right up in Haverhill, and Dan will visit with you. He wants to have a relationship with the entire family, and that's what I think is one of the strengths. It's
Yeah.
the starting point. If you didn't do it that way, it probably wouldn't work.
And if Mountain Valley is not right, there are other options, there are other treatment options, there are other great therapists I know. I'm here to help and
You're not
seek
one that's going to
connections.
say we're the only people that can help your child, because the
Yeah.
honest person, and you know them when you see them, will say, you know what, I don't know that we're the right place for you.
Yeah, oh,
But
absolutely.
I have some references for you, and one of them will work.
Yeah.
Did I tell you this was a fast half hour?
Yes, you did.
Had all my signals that I can get.
It was.
I got to wind it down.
Okay.
I've learned so much today from you. I know where I would send someone that I heard had this problem for sure, because I know Jay, and I know the Beckett family, and I know, full disclosure, my husband worked there for a while. I know that they have only the kid at heart, in mind.
They do.
They want those kids to succeed, and that could be from either being troubled or being anxious or being just hurt, various major ways.
And for me, you know, since I was 16 years old, I knew from then I was going to devote my life to these kids. So just to have this opportunity to speak with you and to speak to the people out there is a real privilege. I'm very
And it's
grateful.
nice for you all who may know someone that is going through this and struggling, and you don't feel you're able to help them, but you'd like to keep helping them. And here's a resource that can help, whether it ends up being with you or just guided by you. So check out his information on the TV, and the ratio is so unbelievable you can't fail. I mean, you haven't had that before with your children probably, and it's just the best.
You know, we're starting to get referrals from parents of graduates at the program, and that means so much to me emotionally, because
Wow.
you know, that's what we look for. And, and we have so many parents that say, can I be a reference? I want to be a reference. I want to help encourage and convince that Mountain Valley is an incredible place that transformed my child's life.
That's the best thing that can happen, would be the testimonial approach of someone who has been there, whose child has thrived, and that's the best you get.
Yeah, it really is. It really
You can't,
is.
better than anything you can say or write. So keep it in mind if you know people that are in need of this sort of thing, and I think you probably do, given the numbers. But thank you, Dan, so
You're
much for
welcome.
coming. I think
Thank you.
I've been educated big time here today, and I know anyone watching has. And just use the information that'll be on the screen, and you'll get the help, and just give him a call if you even think you're in that boat.
Yeah, anytime, absolutely.
He can rule it out, he can rule it in, but don't hesitate. He really wants to. You can tell by listening to him that he wants to help. So that is it, folks. Another quick half hour with another wonderful guest, and I really thank you so much. I think we've all learned a lot about
thank
something
you so
that was
much. It's
almost
a real
a
pleasure.
silent epidemic.
It truly
we
is.
hear about the bullying, we forget what it's doing to the victim.
We're
internally.
living in an age of anxiety.
And the families are affected, the siblings are horribly affected, I'm sure.
That's true.
And anyway, keep him in mind, because this is a resource, and my email is always up as well. If you haven't gotten the information, I will have it. And I hope you use it, because it sounds to me like it would be worth every second. So we will say farewell, and I again am privileged to have had you here, and I hope you feel the same. Until next time, this is Spirit of the Valley. We'll see you next trip.